Welcome to the Crackin Backs Podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Jon Fledzinskas, a clinical and performance psychologist, where we talk about the world of gaming, or more specifically, in the arena where gaming meets the mind. Today, we're leveling up our understanding of the mental game behind the screens. With competitive gaming at the forefront, we'll explore the stress, the strategies, and the psyche of gamers. How do digital warriors keep their cool and find balance in the realm where victory and identity blur the lines? From the depths of online communities to the cutting edge of therapy and sports psychology, we're navigating the virtual and the real. Join us as we tackle the quest for mental health in the gaming galaxy, decode the dynamics of digital friendships, and forge paths for parents and gamers to coexist in peace. With insights from Dr. Fledzinskas and stories from the trenches, we're pressing play on a conversation that can't be paused. Ready, set, listen. Hey, Dr. Jon, it's great to have you on the air. This show is going to be a fun one because we talk about gaming and how all this exponential growth of computers and screen time has really affected, well, I would like to say all of us, but, namely a certain generation that is really fixated on that, these screen time. So welcome to the show, Jon.
Thanks so much for having me. I mean, yeah, we're talking on a computer right now. So.
The irony of it all, right? Yeah. So, Jon, competitive gaming can be a pressure, it's pressure filled as some of these athletic events and sports that we actually talk about, and that Dr. Terry and I typically treat. But what advice do you have for gamers dealing with the same stress and anxiety from the element of their competition? Especially, personal identity and self-worth?
It's a big question. The question's big because, well, performance is big and there's a lot that goes into that. And same with wellness, but competitive gaming itself is such a different landscape than traditional sports, right? Culturally, literally, physically, right? Like ergonomically, the time you put into it, the culture of gaming itself. A couple of points come to mind. First one would be just looking at your overall balance in your life. So what are you doing for your personal wellness? Who are you connected with? Who actually supports you in your endeavors? I've worked with a lot of gamers who their families still kind of don't understand gaming. Maybe they've been a little ostracized, or they might just be kind of disconnected from some people in their lives. So they have their gamer side of their lives and their non-gamer. So just making sure you have good connections and community with people who support you. Lot of good information online about ergonomics in gaming and making sure you're training your body as well as your mind, right? That really wasn't something we saw 5-10 years ago emphasized a ton in esports and gaming. And then the mental side of it too, right? You're playing a game and that's like a whole nother podcast episode, I swear, because the mental side of things, like there's so much that goes into competitive gaming that is mental. You are sitting still and using your hands and your brain, right? And if you make a mistake, if you get pissed off, if you're anxious, you're kind of just left to sit there and try to do something with it. So having good mental routines, both outside and inside the game itself, for your own personal wellness, and then knowing how to respond to stress when it inevitably comes up those are some pretty key points for wellness and performance in these gamers.
Do you feel it's affecting a lot of the social skills of those who are avidly gaming?
No. Oh man, that's a fun one to ask me because like I'm this is going to preface every answer I give you. I am all in advocating gaming being super healthy thing. Gaming usually kind of gets scapegoated, and this has happened historically in the United States, right? Gaming is scapegoated as something that is particularly bad, right? Because you're not getting physical exercise. There's this myth like you're not socializing, you're not getting good social experience. Gaming actually is probably one of the most accessible social outlets for a lot of kids, teens, and adults right now too. I'll even give you, even in my own personal life, man, like most of my friends are gamer nerds that I met when I was between the ages of 7 and 12. And, you know, when you think about gaming, right, as a social thing, you're talking with somebody, you're not looking at them. Okay, that's fine. It's not, you know, eye contact and being in a personal physical space. That is like that holds like a moral highness, I guess. It's like in the hierarchy of like, what's the best social interaction? So you're not getting that, right? So culture, there's a little stigma around that not being good socialization. But then you also think about what you're doing while you're talking. So in gaming, you can be gaming with somebody on a team, or you can just be gaming and talking to somebody online. That became the standard of living during COVID, by the way. Yeah. That was literally like the world got pushed to do that. Wow. Now we're kind of coming out of that. And yeah, you know, gaming and socializing, I think, are really healthy for a lot of people that might have social anxiety, or they just maybe don't connect with people in ways where they don't like small talk. They just want to talk about their shared interests. And yeah, I mean, you can make lifelong friends with gaming. So I'm all in as an advocate for gaming being a very healthy social outlet for people and a way to connect communally, culturally, shared space wise, let alone people who maybe have disabilities too, can't even get out physically a lot, right? The gaming cyberspace is a really good place to connect. Do either of you guys play video games?
I used to play Pac-Man and Galaga.
I crushed Pong. I was a Pong killer. Our engineer is a big gamer.
You bet.
Dude.
Yes.
And David plays games.
Right. That's why he's our engineer.
That's why he's the podcast.
Yeah, you know it. Gotta be the best speedrunner in the world, eh?
Oh man, I hope you have a question about speedrunning. That's a super fun topic. Which if Spencer and Tara, if you don't know what speedrunning is,
never heard of it. So you might as well just go with it since it's out there.
What is it? Might as well lay it out.
Oh please, okay, yeah. Tangents are great too, by the way. Very healthy for the brain. So speedrunning it's basically a competitive subset of gaming. Any game can be sped run. Okay, so speedrunning is completing a game as quick as you can. So beating the game, getting to the end screen with the credits. Typically, a lot of speedrunners can find ways to just like skip levels, glitch through walls, abuse game mechanics so that they can complete the game as fast as possible. And there are literal cultures that develop right within these games around just speedrunning. So that's how rich gaming is as a medium. Like you can get into the nitty gritty. It'd be like remember when they did that Big Three thing for the NBA basketball, right? They had the Big Three competitions and all the old school NBA players are coming back. I don't know what happened to that, by the way. I kind of wish they'd bring that back. Yeah. That was kind of like a niche subculture that was growing out of basketball, right? That is what speedrunning is for a lot of different video games where these gamers just want to go fast. They want to complete the games as quick as possible and master these like really quick and complex movements that they have to sequentially do for. Some speedruns can be 20 minutes. Some can be like 5 hours.
That is not
speed. That's as fast as it gets, man. For some of them.
Holy God almighty. Well, all right. Well, thanks for that tangent. Any psychological benefits that come from that?
Definitely. You definitely get a sense of mastery. Really good connection with community. So you get people who are very much as interested as you are in this game.
That's very cool.
Probably good with schedule keeping, right? You know, a lot of people struggle with time management, which is an executive function. If you don't know what the different executive functions are, I think a lot of people don't know them off the top of their head. Like you can Google those, but
go for it.
Time management and prioritization. What's up?
Go for it. Go.
Oh, okay. Oh, you want me to list all of them? Crap, man. I don't know if I have them all memorized.
Well, no. Just throw out some good ones.
Thank you. Okay, that's easier. Now I can relax. Sports psychology, less pressure. Working memory, the ability to remember what you just saw or heard. Prioritization, so putting things ahead of others on a task list. Time management and organization, so being able to keep a schedule, keep appointments, delineate when you're going to do things, plan ahead, like a day or a week ahead. And emotional control. That's another executive function, which we kind of just talked about, right? Like being able to perform well.
Yeah.
And athletes, you guys are more adjacent to sports world, right? In competitive sports and performance wise, right? All the executive functions are used by some of the best athletes in the world too. And they have to refine them quite a bit.
Yeah. Wow. It's funny you're shedding a whole different light on gaming, but I will say that I would like to delve into esports for a moment. Before I do, we had a chiropractor that her involvement was the chiropractor for the Dallas Mavericks that's owned by Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban called her and said to her that he's starting an esports program at Team and would like her to be involved in managing some of their musculoskeletal complaints. And she's thinking, well, they're just sitting there. What are you talking about? To her surprise, the intensity involved. And so when she showed up there, she said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this to the max. We got to go over their nutritional programs. We got to give them some exercises. They got to de-stress. I was fascinated. What would you say is, the typical practice time for a person on esports?
Yeah, that's changed over the last few years. There used to be sort of this grind mindset where, let me give you a brief rundown of the history of that. So esports, when it wasn't big, people were traveling to other countries to live in homes with other players that were, like for instance, South Korea, they take gaming way more seriously than the US. They'd live in the same house because they'd share internet and they could communicate directly and link up their training schedules. Wow. That's kind of like a gamer house, basically what they called it. Those people would grind for 10, 12 hours a day, and like their nutrition probably wasn't that great. Their sleep quality probably wasn't that great. And what do you expect? I mean, you put a bunch of young people who are kind of going at it on their own in the same house and are like, let's just do this, man. Yeah. Like, that's not, you're not going to get great results. Current culture around that is, I'm sorry if you can hear the dog barking in the background. Wait, hold on. I gotta tell Ted to be quiet. All right. Sorry. There we go. I tried to do it as compassionate.
That was good.
So, you get nowadays, you still got that grind culture. A lot of these gamers stay up fairly late because some of the best competition you can get in training virtually is online late. People who come at, who are a little bit older and have work schedules in the day, or college students, right? And they don't have a lot of time to game in the day. So, and then you get overseas competition, right? So if you're an American player and you want to play late, so there's like a daytime player overseas, you need to stay up late to get that level of competition. So you will still kind of get people in that grind mindset, but esports, I think, as a culture is trying to include, more of a balanced mindset nowadays with physical and mental health. And you're starting to see more prioritization of things like nutrition and a work-life balance, taking breaks, right? Especially if you get tilted. It's so easy to get pissed off and tilted. Tilt's been adopted by esports, by the way, like from poker. It's so easy to get tilted in gaming if you're on a losing streak, and just being able to take a break and step back, break up your training regimen. It's been helpful.
What's tilted? Is that just being pissed off? Is that what that means?
Yeah, tilt is getting mad when you make successive mistakes or you've suffered a few losses in a row during certain rounds or games, and it really degrades your performance. It's like performance degrading frustration and anger.
So let me ask you about the, it was always fascinating to me, the evolution of like these energy drinks. It used to be something that was so exclusive to, going to the gym and training. And then I have a son that's a jock and one that's a nerd that's actually graduating for cybersecurity. So you can imagine how much time he's spent on the computer. And I talked to him about it. He goes, yeah, they have gamers fuel or something like that. I go, so is that still something that's that's consumed? And because I can't imagine what it would be like sitting there for hours.
I have no personal experience with any of that. I've never even drank a Monster. So whatever nutritionist resides in either of you, you're probably like, yay, go John. But I mean, no shade to anyone who drinks that stuff. If you need it, you need it. I've never needed it, but yeah, that still exists. I think a lot of sponsors, corporate sponsors for esports, right? Because esports is funded by corporate sponsors. It's not funded traditionally, like again, to use the NBA, like Mark Cuban and Steve Ballmer, these high rollers who can afford teams and fund them. Yeah. Esports needs to pull from corporate sponsors, so you get like Doritos and Mountain Dew and Gatorade and stuff like that, right? And G Fuel or Gamer Fuel, they definitely push, and it's marketing. Here's your niche. Yeah. Gamers like sugar and they need caffeine. Like,
all right, bud. I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna ask the elephant in the room, because being old school, and like I said, Pong and maybe Pac-Man. That was about as far as I go. So there is a huge disconnect between my generation and even my kids, where we come home, we see them sleeping until 10 or 11, then they game all day long and they don't have a job. And we're like, and we just focus on, well, you're just being a lazy bum and you're just playing games all day long and you're not providing, you're not working, not paying your bills, you're not doing all that. And I know it's wrong. I know, just like my parents thought, Elvis Presley, rock and roll was like the devil, right? So I know every generation goes through that, right? So how do you bridge this gap? And for the gamers, we hear, oh, it's addictive. We it's this, and they become mindless rats and they don't do anything, which is also wrong coming from that standpoint. So how do you address that elephant for both the parent and the kid, where the kid, maybe you need to pay your bills, but you also need to enjoy your social life, and then for the parent going, they need to pay their bills, but they also have to have a social life. How do you bridge that gap? Right?
How much time we got? I want to applaud you, by the way. Like that's I commend you on saying that doesn't seem right or that seems wrong. Like, it's so easy to say it's the gaming. I even have clients come in still, like, for therapy. Parents come in, they're like, they're addicted to the game. It's the gaming. The game's so bad. The game causes them to do all this stuff. I'm like, it's not it, man. It's easy to make it about that, but it's not it. So I applaud you for recognizing that. It's not an easy answer, because it's a multifaceted answer. Gaming, to the first part of your question, right, to like understand it more, just ask questions, maybe game with your kids, be curious about it. Like, what do they get from it? So is it a competitive game? Who do they know in the game? How do you play the game? How do you get better at the game? How long's the game been out? What's the genre of the game? There's so many damn genres and subgenres of games. So just be curious, approach it like if your kid was playing a new sport or competing in some kind of new school-based thing, academics thing, right? Just be curious and ask more questions, because you'll hear them talk a lot about it, right? And they'll demonstrate how much they've learned and what they're getting out of it. So just be curious, maybe game with them if you can. Don't be afraid of sucking at first, because it's hard, man. I mean, gaming, it's its own language. If I was like, go buy a PlayStation and play Fortnite. Okay. First off, you got to know which PlayStation to buy. You got to set up the PlayStation. You got to know how to use the controller, how to set up the Wi-Fi, how to set up the system on the TV. You got to know how to adjust it. You got to know how to install Fortnite. Got to know how to play Fortnite at a very basic level, and you got to learn how to master Fortnite. That's a lot of steps, right? That's one of the biggest barriers, I think, generationally, is kids somehow can, quote unquote, get it easily because they've grown up with it young and they can access it. Yeah. And gaming, honestly, sometimes isn't very accessible to people who don't play them. So it can feel like it's kind of insular, sort of like network, right? It's sort of insular culture. Yeah. Just be curious, try to connect, and then ask them if you need help with learning how to play them too. Or if you don't understand what they meant when they said needed or tilt. That's the first part of your question.
Yeah, in addition, because as parents, we want our kids to make a living and do all that, and we see it so time consuming during the day, and they'll play all day, all night, and they're not working to bring home. And then I hear parents will hear, well, this, Terry Crews is a big gamer. I go, well, Terry Crews is also making millions in his job and comes home and that's how he relaxes. So you're not making a dime. You can't, anything like that. So how do we as parents install work ethic to bring money in, but on the same time they have work ethic because they're playing these games and doing all the stuff you just said?
Yeah, right. Oh, and so you
Yes.
recognize the work ethics being funneled into the game. Amazing. I don't know where you learned to think like that, but that's awesome, man. Like seriously, I wish all of the parents of the kids
I
worked
wish
with
they
could
would take
think
their
like
work
you.
ethic of all the stuff they spent learning this game and put it into where it actually makes money. But right, so they have the work ethic,
Yeah,
but they're
right.
not paying their bills. So that's where my disconnect as an old time parent. I understand the work. I just wish they transformed it into where it actually covered their bills and where they can live on their own and they weren't living off parents' couches till they're 40. You know.
This is where the multifaceted part of my answer comes in, because there's a lot that goes into play, right? There's the state of our nation and the economy. There's what young people have access to in terms of resources for their own knowledge. Other people they know in their lives who are working or not. Their different executive functions, and if they're burnt the heck out, if they're tired, if they're under-resourced, if they don't have good sleep schedules or energy management or connection with other people, it could feel like an insurmountable task to not only just try to get a job, but first off, apply for one and do an interview like that. That could seem a lot heavier to them than it might to us, who, we all have jobs, right? Like, I don't know if this podcast isn't your full-time job, but you know what I mean? Like we're here already and they're not. And we're a different generation. So growing up in their generation, seeing what they've been through with the economy and COVID and these wars going on and their schools, right, and safety stuff. Like there's so much going on culturally and economically. I think that's burning people out. And I really think people are still kind of healing from COVID. We had to normalize living on our own, isolated in a room away from loved ones for quite a while. And it's shocking to think that we wouldn't glean the repercussions of that. We couldn't see the repercussions of that years down. I think we're experiencing that right now. So to your answer, to your question, Dr. T, the answer I think is economically and socially, kids may be under-resourced or overwhelmed. And young people are still trying to kind of find themselves and understand their identity, and having to do all that while also applying for a job where maybe they wouldn't feel like they're compensated well enough, or they don't, quote unquote, need to because they're living with their parents still. That could be a big deterrent. But that's when it becomes all about the game, right? Because you see the game being played and you're like, it's this damn game. If you could get off this game, you could apply these skills elsewhere. I really don't think it's ever going to be the game. Just like it's not anything else, I don't know if one of your questions is going to ask me about gaming addiction as a construct, right? But I could get into that, but that's my answer for you. It's under-resourced executive function. It's a lack of good social support to kind of branch out more, and it's economic and social stressors that really preclude young people from kind of putting themselves out more and maybe getting a job.
So we have a dilemma going on, and it's the diagnosis of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And more kids are becoming diagnosed and then on Adderall or the other one. We could easily say, oh, it's because of the gaming, because everything's so high speed. But in actuality, I've witnessed a enormous focus and intensity with the game. So how do you have ADHD but yet still are able to hyper focus for hours? So I think it's the excuse of the drug companies to try to get people more diagnosed and on Adderall. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so back to executive function. I don't know how many more times I'll say the phrase, so sorry if you get bored of it. But ADHD, if you want to look at it in a simplistic way, is a brain type or a neurotype where your executive functions, right, the different parts of your brain that execute these different things, like your working memory, your sustained attention, are not working as well as society would expect, or working in the ways that society expects, right? That's where medication comes into play. We say, oh, you're ADHD. You didn't do this thing I wanted you to do that you found very boring. Therefore, you have a deficit, and then we're going to give you medication to kind of hyper drive your brain to do the thing we want you to do. So that's why you're seeing it. It's because the demands of society are asking these people with brains that are wired in this way to do things in ways that might not work for them. Sorry, I thought my dog came in for a second. So that's how I look at ADHD in the current paradigm of getting things done and needing medication and whatnot. This could be for work or school or whatever. With hyperfixation, right, and hyperfocusing, that's just how people who are ADHD's brains are wired. Their attention is interest based. So, for you or me or somebody else who might not identify with ADHD or have that diagnosis or brain type, we might be able to do things that we find arduous or boring or slow, right, in a way that's easier for us. We might not enjoy it. I mean, the word boring exists for a reason, but we might be able to actually sustain our attention on.
Yeah.
People who are ADHD, neurodivergent, right, is kind of a blanket statement for people whose brains have developed differently than society would call the norm. ADHD just being one of those brain types. Mm-hmm. These people struggle to do things that their brains say, hey, this is boring. This is taking too long. This causes me distress or discomfort. So the gaming, safe haven, because I'm interested in this so I can engage with this. I actually feel competent. It could be also like a self-efficacy thing, right? Like, oh, heck, this game that I'm really good at, I can sustain my attention on this. This is a very positive source of self-esteem for me. Whereas my math homework, which I don't really understand, it's not taught in a way that my brain understands, and I'm not paying attention to it. I can't do it, and it makes me feel like I'm not intelligent, so I don't want to engage in it.
I got a question with performance enhancements drugs. We see this in physical sports, all the sports. But do you see any performance enhancing practices in the world of gaming to kind of give people an edge? I've always heard the Koreans have faster internet, which gives them an edge. Do you see this performance enhancing drugs coming in to give people an edge?
I'm drinking one right now, buddy. Coffee right here. Good old caffeine. But also Adderall. So there was a time where no medication was being checked at all for players, right, in gaming and esports, and Adderall was just being used like a hotcake, right? It was just a performance enhancing stimulant that would help them hyperfocus while they're gaming, keep their energy levels up if they're getting tired. See, I'm not involved that much at a deep level in terms of esports medicine, so I don't know what the current regulations are, but I do know that in terms of regulations in general, esports is very scattered. So there's not like one esports hub. I was on Twitter the other day, or sorry, X. I'm just going to call it Twitter. I was on Twitter the other day, and I saw this. There's a researcher, psychologist who posts about collegiate esports and what's going on in that world. And he posted like, I'm just going to make up a number. There were like 50 different esports collegiate leagues that were developed by different, areas in the United States, different collections of colleges, maybe from D1 to D3 level or outside the NCAA. So it's kind of like the Wild West in terms of organizational structure in esports right now. And if that's how it's like, as an organization, I can only imagine what it's like in regulatory practices with things like Adderall.
All right, so let's see social media and how it affects the brain and the addictive behavior of social media. Could your approach help in a sense detox these people that are addicted or socially or that just are so immersed in it that they can't let loose from it?
Yeah. Well, I like how you shifted it there, because you're like, are immersed. Like, I don't think, like, I know the term addiction is used loosely now, right? If you do something over a long period of time and you feel like you're doing just that, like we call it addictive, right? You could even say Netflix is addicting. To me, my approach is, if gaming and technology is being used in abundance, right, and there are other areas of your life that are being neglected or you're not getting your needs met, what's behind that? So why is it that the phone or social media becomes the area you get your needs met, right? What do you not have outside of that would help you get these needs met? Are you super burnt the hell out and all of your executive functions are challenging for you to use, right? And you feel like you have to go at this alone? and you feel like and you feel like maybe all the people in your life, right, your teachers, maybe even your parents, right, are judging you for doing this thing, and so you feel really incompetent. You feel like, oh, I'm incapable. I enjoy this thing, but everyone else seems to think it's terrible, and I'm just supposed to figure it out and do better, right? That could actually cause you to feel shame and actually dive into the behavior more, because it's your only way of coping. So my approach would be unlink shame from enjoying whatever it is you enjoy, right? Don't beat yourself up for doing it for a long period of time. I don't think there's a quote unquote right amount of time to do it. I think the approach could be less about avoiding it and more about incorporating other things in your life. So how can you use social media and do other great things for yourself, like get a little bit more exercise, connect with your friends and family more, right? Take care of your body, take care of your mind. You don't have to throw away the thing that you love, but you need to incorporate other sources
on that
of
note,
support
what
in your life.
language do you use? Because I'm still trying to be that better parent, and it's, you know, and I know I'm not alone. It's across the world. And what language you use to get that person who will spend a lot of time in the game, again, who doesn't have the job, to support those weaknesses, to help get that call a week, or support those things that to help that gamer or that person find balance in their life so they can pay their bills and still enjoy their social aspects of gaming. Oh, it's very
nice.
specific.
This sounds oddly
I have no
specific,
problem
Dr. T.
saying
This
it's
is turning into a
specific.
consultation.
I have no problem at all, you know, because I think if you talk specifically, there's going to be other people that are going to identify with it. So of course it's specific.
Oh, of course, man. Yeah, I mean, you're speaking to, you know, thousands of parents across America right now. Yeah, the language. I mean, hey, you can say something's addictive. That's fine. I mean, that's common vernacular, right? I understand what you mean when you say it, because it's an overabundance of one thing, as opposed to a diversity of things for wellness, right? The key point there being, I detach the stigma from social media and gaming. I think of them as positive things, and then I think of more about how do we diversify your life, if that's what you want too, right? Like, it's kind of like if you'd work with somebody who's actually in addiction recovery, what else do you want in your life? Do you want to diversify the things you do for your self-care? That has to come from themselves intrinsically. The language I use is just really affirming and non-shame based. So, you know, it's kind of like, I mean, you guys even both were like redirecting your language while we've been talking. And you don't need to walk on eggshells with me, by the way. You could think gaming is bad or addictive. I'm not hurt by that. I'm not offended, because I understand where you're coming from, right? Like, you live in America, you live in the same culture as me. I've heard all of this stuff too most of my life, even growing up when I was a kid, right? Like, this gaming, why are you gaming so much? But yeah, the language would really just be more of a curiosity based thing. And then I think to help, for, you know, what you said, Dr. T, and this ain't a personal plug here, but getting a therapist who understands different executive functions and understands neurodivergence, I think, is really key in helping people who game in ways people think is overly abundant. And I really think a good understanding of, like, those key areas I talked about, like social connections, mental health and physical health. I mean, even health related conditions too, because a lot of neurodivergent people, I'm conflating gamers with neurodivergent people, right? Not all gamers are neurodivergent folks, of course, but a lot of neurodivergent people have concurrent health conditions too, that either go unrecognized or underdiagnosed. Like, for instance, a lot of autistic folks have EDS, Ehlers-Danlos, and POTS, right? Where your orthostatic changes when a lot of autistic folks have those health conditions, and they can go unrecognized or undiagnosed, right? If I have POTS and EDS and my body is really susceptible to hypermobile damage, and if I move around a lot, I get headaches and my sleep's terrible, what's a really accessible way of regulating myself and not moving a lot? It's gaming.
I think you're absolutely right.
Just
and I think a lot of it
example.
is just because it doesn't, you don't understand something doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just trying to find the understanding and find how to support instead of how to shame. I think those are good points.
It's hard, man. I mean, we're all wired to see difference, and if you see difference in other, you question it because it might challenge your worldview. It might challenge your understanding of how people are. It might even bring up some biases we all have, right, about ourselves or other people. So when we're faced with something like that, it's easy to get defensive of our viewpoint or what we've been told, right? If you've been told something your whole life and then someone presents new information, you're going to hold on to the baby that is your previous knowledge and go, wait a minute, this has worked for me for 40 plus years. Right. What are you talking about?
I was gravely wrong in believing that gaming was, something that you sequestered yourself from the world and you lost all your social skills. Like I said, my other son he's actually going into cybersecurity, but he would spend, he would get his homework done and spend his hours spend his hours. Hi, Dave. He would spend hours, through the night till about 1, 2, 3 in the morning and gaming. And I had said to my ex-wife, I go, I'm really worried about Heath and, his ability to express himself and his social skills and all that stuff. She said to me, she goes, you should hear him with his buddies. They're laughing, they're carrying on. And I go, all right, you know what? I have to change my focus on that whole thing. And he does have very good social skills, and he's learned all the, the nuances that you could learn from, cognitive, the cognitive skills or the cognition and speed of cognition and, visual cues and things like that. It's pretty cool stuff. But there were some concerns though, with regards to schoolwork. You go from something that's high energy, very captivating to then having to read a chapter in a book. I don't know about you guys, but that would be a complete decline in my executive functioning. What do you
Absolutely.
suggest?
Hey, me too. Like I've even noticed like lately for myself, I've been, I'm building my business. I'm doing a lot of stuff online. I have little projects I'm focusing on. And then I get a little bit sucked into the doom scrolling on social media occasionally. So I'm feeding my brain that. And when I go to read a book on like self-compassion, right, I can only handle about 3 pages. And then my brain goes, that was nice. Let's step away now.
Maybe we should do that in reverse, read the boring chapter first.
That could be kind of like a vicissitudes of life thing over time. Maybe we'll eventually see our brains go, hey, we've had this abundance of tech for the last 20 years, right? If we're still alive, right? If we can live a long life, and then we'll switch back to more offline things. We'll go outside more. Kind of like a zeitgeist, if you will, of our habit and what we're investing energy into. My suggestion would be there, looking at academics. That's a whole nother podcast episode, I swear. Academics, man. The way in which school is structured right now. You go to class, right? And this is like a typical grade school experience. You sit in class for an hour. You get like a 5-minute break, go to another class, sit in class for an hour, maybe 50 minutes, right? And we talked about, for instance, ADHD being an attention system that's interest-based. If you put an ADHD person in a classroom for an hour and they're not allowed to move, they're not allowed to fidget, they're not allowed to use their electronics to regulate themselves, they're just asked to sit and listen to a person talk, they're going to get real squirmy. They might want to talk to their friends. Yeah, they're done. They're done. And doing that successively throughout the day, which is learning, right? They're trying to teach in school. They're trying to instill learning. And then you go home to do homework. You're burnt the hell out. Your executive function is completely taxed. Your brain literally goes, why are you asking me to burn the candle on both ends? And maybe for us when tech didn't exist, right? As heavy as it is now, that was easier for our executive function because we weren't as burned out. Maybe the ways we were taught at a neurological level, at an experiential level to pay attention and to learn and whatnot, it was more normalized for our whole nervous system to be off electronics and to be attentive to the sensory aspects of the teaching environment and the teacher and the pen and paper and learning. So I think it's a little bit of nature and nurture. I do think we're seeing more autistic and ADHD folks just in general because, that's just how society works. These are brain types. People have these brains, right? Some people go their whole lives undiagnosed or unrecognized. So we're just starting to see more of these needs for executive function accommodations, right, happening in the academic level because of the propagation of people. There are more and more people we have each year on this planet. So, and by the way, this is a really important message, I think, in this whole space is executive function needs are human needs. I don't care if you're ADHD or not. We all have different executive functions in our brain, and some of us are better than others at utilizing them. And some of us can get anxious or stressed or burnt out, even if we're not neurodivergent. And our executive function just ain't there. So the more we can recognize these needs and accommodate just human beings in the academic and workspaces for these things, the better everyone's quality of life is going to be.
I don't know if you have kids or not, but if you do, or if you're advising a parent that their kid is getting involved in gaming, how would you introduce them into that world, and how would you put restrictions on time? Would you put, give me a protocol for those who are curious.
No kids, but my wife works with animals for a living, so lots of fur babies and a lot of kid clients. A lot of kid clients and a lot of parent support I've offered. And it's actually a huge need right now in my practice is giving parents these tools and resources, especially like Dr. T was asking for. Hold on, trying to remember your question. Working memory. See, there it is.
Yeah. Just like
the question is,
if a kid was getting involved, or you're the parent and you want to introduce the kid to it in a certain way. I mean, I know people that are completely restrictive of it until a certain age, So what would be a protocol for you?
Let the kid explore games, understand what game ratings mean. So what is it in E for everyone versus teen or mature game? What's involved in that? Understand how the game is played, whether it's with strangers online, just friends, solo, against the computer.
Right.
And then really, I would say if parents aren't involved at the actual playing level, is just play the game with your kid. I don't even care if it's once, but like get that actual experience so you can know what's going on in their mind. You can see what they're having to do in the game to succeed. You can see what they struggle with in the game. Games offer quite a bit in terms of regulation and connection, but there's also a lot of metaphors too, right? I remember reading this book about it was a psychologist who was reflecting on his history of video games and just gaming and how it's accepted in American culture and how it's evolved. And he was talking about how he kept replaying this one level and losing in the same way. And he was just kind of like going through the ropes and maybe almost dissociating a little bit with the game. And there was a real life parallel where he was very much stuck. And he was kind of just sticking to his old habits there and not trying to be flexible. So the game became kind of a window into his mind and his habits in that moment.
Interesting. I'm sure you could leverage some, real breakthroughs if you're aware of how that's working for you or not. That's a wow. It's a pretty cool idea.
Journal, meditate, do stuff that improves self-monitoring, right? Talk to other people about how you're thinking or feeling. These are ways to harness self-monitoring and improve it. And self-monitoring, as you might guess, is another executive function.
Yeah, I got some work to do. I do find, so what's your thoughts on where a lot of the gaming is going from a 2D platform, looking at the computers, to the 3D platform or VR?
Yeah, man. I mean, I haven't touched VR personally for my own gaming stuff. I play games almost every day, by the way. So I am very much involved in video games, like personally too, in my life. I have not touched the 3D stuff like the Oculus or whatnot. I've read a few different papers and posts and such from colleagues online who use that stuff in therapy and who've used it for their own leisure. I think it's just like any other form of media, right? People are going to be a little skeptical about, is this healthy or not? It's kind of like when games first came out, there's kind of this like real concerned culture about, is this healthy? Is this good? Is this bad? So I think we're kind of still in the initial stages of just being curious and possibly skeptical about its application and use. I can't see it being much different than just traditional gaming at a 2D level, though. I think it's still engaging in some kind of game, right, in cyberspace. I imagine there's different neuron activation when you're seeing something 3D and, proprioception when you move your body, right? proprioception or
You're fine.
proprioception. I never know how to pronounce that one.
I knew what you were talking about.
Yeah,
it's good.
Thanks, guys.
See, I'll go with
you're the physio
proprioception,
guy,
but
so,
we all know what you're talking
you.
about.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. You're very affirming. You're very validating, Dr. T. But that's it, man. I mean, like, it's probably different neuron activation, but really at the end of the day, it's just gaming still. And accessibility wise could help people who are disabled and can't use their hands or arms very well, or their legs, right? And probably a lot of therapeutic utility with interaction, right? I know some people who've done exposures for people who have phobias, right? They'll use VR to actually expose them to the stimulus that they're afraid of to help their nervous system desensitize. So I imagine there could even be some exposure level if you start incorporating games that help people address things.
So
that
I'll get asked a lot of questions, and I think Dr. Spencer brought up this to a point where when kids want to start getting into games, is there an age due to brain development that is too early, or is a better time? You know, you'll see parents go, he's not getting the cell phone until 8th grade or 7th grade yet. Sometimes I'll come back and go, well, that's how kids communicate now. So you're actually telling that kid he can't have these friends. But again, with the algorithms out there, they get into the brain early. So what's your thoughts on that?
It's really hard to say. I don't think there's a right answer, but I do know that what you're describing is the fear, right? Fear that somehow technology is going to negatively influence my child's development. I even tell you this, like, you know, my father-in-law, one time we were at a Korean barbecue place, and he was telling us a good old story about how he saw I think it was maybe a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old on an iPad, and he was just ignoring his family and on the iPad. And if you took the iPad away, he got frustrated, right? And his concerns were these darn kids, right? And they're getting addicted to technology. Yeah. And if you replace that stimulus with anything the kid enjoys, you might have a similar response, right? Of like, I'm frustrated, give me that thing back. The technology itself is just so varied and exciting that a lot of things just don't compete with it. So you remember the newspaper, right? I mean, we still got it, but I know you remember it too. You can read Washington Post or New York Times or whatever the hell you want on the internet instantly at any place and any time in your life now. Right? That is way more accessible. It's also paper and tree friendly. Maybe not environment with the electricity, but like, it's tree friendly. Is that a morally better or worse option? Is that a more damaging to the brain option than a newspaper? I don't think so. But I do think behind parents' fear of the technology influencing their kids negatively is maybe their own fear about their own use in their life. So if I was a parent and I thought, this social media sucks, man, I'm addicted to this phone. This isn't a phone, by the way. It's a computer that can call people. I'm addicted to this phone. And it scares me how much time it takes. And I think it's damaging to my brain, right? You know, it's like I'm standing next to a microwave whenever I'm on this phone for 2 hours. I'm going to transfer that to my kid, right? I'm going to think, oh, my kid's going to be, you know, neglected in some ways if they're on the iPad all the time, or, you know, if they game too long, it's going to be damaging to them or do really terrible things to their physiology and their mind. That's oversimplifying, right? Because you're not in that fear. I don't hear about any of the other experiences this kid's having. Is the kid talking to other people on their iPad? Are they solving problems they can transfer to real life skills? Are they exploring their interests? I have kids who refuse to go to school in therapy. And I learned, I've been learning how the stock market works and how to do day trading outside of school. I'm like, so you're learning quite a bit. You're just not going to school, right? So it's how the technology is being used. What are the needs being met, right? These are the things I think parents need to invest more time in when they think about giving their kids a phone or an electronic device. And I think, you know, any decision made out of fear means there's no space for curiosity.
I love that. And for all those fathers out there, I'm going to throw myself under the bus one more time because, you know, I don't mind. I'd rather learn than care. So, yeah, I'm going to throw myself in the bus because out of my mouth, but I've also heard it out of other fathers' mouth, but I'm just going to call it my mouth, that I'll compare whether it's a phone, the game, to a crack pipe. And I go, and I'll say, they'll be outside playing, and they have to run back to the condo to play their game when you'll be outside and you're enjoying something as a family, and the kid just keeps, it's been an hour, I have to run back. And I'm like, oh, you ran back to your crack pipe, So, and I'm not the only one that's heard it, but yes, that has come out of my mouth. And so how do you look at that and they get jittery if they're out at the beach or out in the mountains or hiking or riding a bike, and they get jittery and they want to run back. And I'm like, especially if you're on vacation, you're like, well, you can do that anywhere, but you're only going to see this castle once. You're only going to see that. And it may not be interesting to them. So how you've heard that before, I'm sure, in therapy. How do you bridge that gap?
Yep. I explore, for instance, in the environment, like let's take the beach for an example as a context. I explore what are their needs in that situation, and why would gaming or going back to home to the electronic be the ideal choice for them and their brains, right? Could be sensory aspects of the beach are overwhelming. They could hate the feeling of sand. They could think the light's too bright and they've never worn a hat or sunglasses in their life, right? Because sometimes we're not aware of our needs. We're really just not in tune with our bodies sometimes. We're not aware of, the control we have or the things we can do to accommodate ourselves. I think about, people in general. Some people don't like to be around a lot of people. They prefer a smaller space. And if you're on like a super crowded beach, that could feel dysregulating to your nervous system. I also think about change in environment and transition. That's a huge difficulty for a lot of neurodivergent folks. It's my brain is fixated on this thing, and to rip it away from me, it almost feels intrusive. I need time to prepare for this transition. So going to the beach isn't just going to the beach. It's stopping what I'm doing, getting up out of my chair, going downstairs, putting on my jacket, or finding the jacket if you don't put it in the same place every day, right? Finding my shoes, putting on the shoes, getting in the car, driving, being in the car with whoever it is. What are we going to talk about? Sometimes there's a level of unpredictability that I think people want. People want to fulfill the need for consistency. That's why you see a lot of people get into routines, especially ADHD and autistic folks. So going to the beach isn't just going to the beach for them. It's a lot of different needs that need to be assessed and sort of underlying, dug up, so that we can say, okay, what would make it easier for you to go to the beach? What if you had your phone with you, sunglasses, a hat, shoes that make it so sand doesn't get into your shoes, and then a nice spot on the beach that isn't as loud, right? Would that make it easier for you to be present at the beach?
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Joe, I'll tell you, we are entering this phase of our program that we call the rapid fire questions. It's going to require you to put your gaming executive function speed skills on. I'm going to ask you 5 different questions, and brevity is brilliant. If you could answer in short term, that would be great.
I was going to say it never happens.
You always get caught up and asked more about it. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'll try, man.
There you go.
That's an executive
Love
function,
it.
though. That's
Ooh.
impulse control and self-monitor.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah. All right. Question number 1. If you're ready. Are you ready, Dr. John?
I'm ready.
All right. Best cognitive tip that you give on a daily basis for your clients that everyone should hear repetitively?
Find ways to be present and have compassion for yourself.
That's fantastic.
That was great. Some of our prolific guests seem to be tapped into that being present thing, and I commend you on that. That's great. Thank you. Question number 2. Best way that you have found to exercise your brain away from the screen?
Meditation, reading, and exercise.
Good. And question number 3. Yeah, that is fantastic. Question number 3. What's the one thing people would be surprised to learn about you?
I love anime and video games, even though I also love basketball and weightlifting.
Oh, very good.
Well, maybe not if you've listened to the show and you read my website.
No. I just rock with that. This is really cool.
A basketball and gamer just chimed in, yo.
Yes.
That was the passion right there.
Hey,
that was great.
If you watch Paul George's podcast, he's talking about playing NBA 2K every few episodes. So, I mean, a lot of these athletes play. I mean, hell, there's a former football player who opened a Magic the Gathering Pokemon trading card store in Thousand Oaks, for crying out loud. Like,
oh, awesome.
We're everywhere, man.
That's great. I thought the answer to the question was for people to pronounce your last name, Fledzinskas. For the listening audience, we've been avoiding saying his last name because it is such a tongue twister. Fledzinsky. Say it, John. Dr. John.
And you notice how, John, I have never even attempted your last name. I just call you John.
You might be here. You might be surprised. Here, this is the real answer to your question: is that I usually just go by John, just to avoid that.
I'm sure. Growing up, you've heard it botched up 1,000 times, or people.
I got substitute teacher trauma, man.
Yeah.
No, I got substitute teacher trauma. All right, John, stop, please. I'm right here, man. Just don't say.
You had me at hello.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. All right, question number 4. If you could go back in time and meet someone, who would it be and why?
Damn, I don't know. Thich Nhat Hanh. Learn more about his journey, coming to America, teaching mindfulness, how he developed his personal philosophy. Haven't really read his biographies and such, and he passed away recently in the last few years, but amazing practitioner of mindfulness and just really good messages for people.
Say it again. Who was it?
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Okay, that's almost as bad as your last name. Say it again.
Well, it looks like his name is spelled Thich Nhat Hanh.
Interesting.
But Thich Nhat Hanh.
All right.
Thich Nhat Hanh. All right.
Adding another thing to my reading list.
Good. Yeah, I like that. Mindfulness is his.
Listen, I'm sure there's more.
Good.
It's the first one that came to my mind.
But his thing was mindfulness?
Yeah, how mindfulness can be practiced in America, right? In a very simple and accessible way. Making mindfulness and being present a very useful and practical strategy for living. I love in his book, I think it's A Miracle of Mindfulness, he has an example of his friend who's he's an author and he's writing a book and he's eating like a tangerine or an orange. And then he asks his friend, are you eating the orange or are you eating the book?
Interesting.
Interesting.
Go to the movies. Are you eating the popcorn or are you eating the movie?
Movie, right.
All right.
Okay, Grasshopper, the last of the 5 questions.
Literally.
You're right. What is the one thing you wish you had learned earlier in your career?
All right. Well, this is a whole nother can of worms, but I'll keep it short. What ableism is, right? What ableism is, how to look at, you're asking me what is ableism? Ableism, the idea that there is a specific way of thinking, acting, and existing that is the norm or acceptable. So ableism says that if you're not doing something in a way that an able-bodied person would, or a person whose brain is not ADHD or autistic or OCD or any of these other brain types, right? If you're not acting or thinking or existing in these ways, that something is wrong with you.
I like that.
Interesting.
That's where a lot of the stigma comes from, right? And the fear. It's like, I haven't been told this is normal. Like, what's going on? Like, what's the disorder that people are looking
I like
for,
that. Right? John, this has been fantastic. And thank you for not only answering my own stuff, but for all the other dads that may not have the guts to ask the questions or go there, but have the same stuff in their heads. So I appreciate your candidness and I appreciate your answers because it's all about relationships and creating better ones and trying to be better at what we do. And that's a lot of this show is trying to help people be healthier mentally, physically, and nutritionally. So thank you for that. To close, we're going to close, but to close, the floor is yours. So what message do you want to leave on the listener's ear when it comes to all the stuff that you deal with?
Damn. What's a wrap-up statement? I guess adopt a curiosity mindset. If you notice like judgment or fear around something or someone, or an activity, right? In this case, gaming or anything, right? Anything people may do in their lives that other people might be afraid of or think is just odd or bizarre or just, I don't know, not normal, quote unquote. Yeah. Approach it with a curiosity mindset. Ask yourself, like, what needs does this person have that this behavior, this way of communicating and connecting gets their needs met? How are these people arriving at these conclusions that this is the behavior that is useful for them? And trust people's autonomy too. Like, believe that people can make informed decisions for themselves. Sometimes they might need a little bit more support or resources, but we always do the best we can with the knowledge and skills we have. And if someone is struggling or having a hard time diversifying or balancing their life, try to get them support. And like you said, Dr. T, try to help them get healthier connections.
On that note, if this sparks any thoughts for our listeners, we'll put a way to contact you in the description of the show. And for those that do have questions that need answers and want to make the change in their household, please look up Dr. Jon and maybe he can help you bridge those gaps. So we appreciate your time, buddy, and thanks for coming on our show.
Likewise, super fun, super awesome experience.
Thanks.
Great to chat with you all. And thanks, David.
No problem.
For being the tech guy.
Let's go.
And a gamer nerd like me.
That's great. Thanks, John.
Be well.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Crackin Backs Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Crackin Backs Podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday. See you next time.